We are good. Well, what's up, Juice Plus? My name is Bryan Marsh, and I have the absolute honor of filling in for Celine while she's traveling through New Zealand for Game Plan. She's very disappointed that she couldn't be here online with Gordon because Gordon is definitely one of her favorites. I'll just make sure everyone's on mute. And knowing Celine, she would have worked pretty hard to change flights and meetings and that around, but she was unable to get, so she's asked me to host this meeting with Gordon, which I feel is an absolute privilege. I met Gordon about 12 months ago, and he came out here to Australia for Game Plan, and he was on the Gold Coast. And then Adam and I decided to follow him to Perth and Sydney just to soak up a lot of his wisdom. I think if you know anything about Gordon, he will do just about anything for everyone. Recently, I was sitting in Tampa with him, and we're at the US conference, and we're sitting there having coffee, and we're talking about some business stuff. And people were just coming up to him and asking for advice, and he was giving them a lot of time. And it was a kind of a shock to see that he was saying, reach out to me at any time for any advice. And I was looking at their lanyards, and they were DDs and SDDs in the business. And I think it just is a testament to his character that, you know, he's not paid for that, and he will pretty much do anything for everyone, and especially for those micro entrepreneurs, which I absolutely love. And what I also love about Gordon is that he's an absolute execution guy. I love execution. The fair bit, or the little bit I've had to do with Gordon over the last year, I've always walked away with ideas and strategies that I've implemented, and it's definitely impacted our business. This call is themed how to thrive in all cycles, which I'm really excited about. If you know anything about our journey, we had a lot of growth in the first 12 to 18 months, but we're definitely at a point where we're focused on systems and focused on developing leaders to ensure that we're ready for the next part of growth. And so I can't wait for this call. I think we're all going to take away a lot of notes that are going to impact our business. So I'm going to hand it over to Gordon and let him take it away.
Oh, thank you so much, Bryan. Thank you for the kind introduction. It certainly has been fun getting to know you and working together. The funny story about Tampa, I remember sitting there and all the people coming up, and I seem to remember a lot of them wanted me to introduce you to them. So I think you were the star of the table, not me. But you know, it's kind of an interesting sort of philosophy about all things. I appreciate the kind words, but for me, one of my mentors taught me, you can pretend to care, you can't pretend to show up. And I'm just one of those people that love to show up when people need me, and do everything I can to help whenever I can. So I appreciate everybody being on the call. I will tell you ahead of time, I had prepared this wonderful PowerPoint. My graphics girl was working on it. Her computer broke down, no surprise there. And then from there, I got a message from Bryan. I'd sent him a Facebook, see you in an hour and 10 minutes. And he's like, no, it's 10 minutes. So we're going to have some fun with this. The topic is one, you know, originally Celine had asked me to talk about the concept of how to thrive in down cycles. And I suspect the reason she asked that is because in business, if you've been in it long enough, you tend to go through all cycles. I can tell you in my business career, especially in my time with Jeff and Juice Plus, some of the down cycles we went through are probably beyond the comprehension of what most people would believe anybody could survive. And I think a more apropos topic is not how to survive in down cycles, but more how to survive in all cycles and how to thrive in all cycles. I will tell you, in the context of my 26-year journey with Jeff, opening countries and markets and coaching leadership, we have had countries that we invested in and sent leaders to fail. We have had situations, there was a time when we lost over 500 NMDs in about a 90-day period. That was a fun time. We watched the sales at that time drop pretty significantly from about 30 million a month to 2 million a month. And I just got a message the other day from Dan Holtzman, who recently left the business, reminding us that he actually had a meeting during the transition toward Juice Plus in Europe, where they announced Juice Plus from the front of the room, and over 500 NMDs got up and left the meeting and left the business. So, and here's the cool thing. All those times at the time feel like really challenging things, like problems are just not going to solve. Turns out they were all blessings in disguise. We actually learned that in the down times, where a lot of people embrace fear, we saw opportunity, and it was, where do we pivot and how do we go about things in this cycle so that not only can we thrive, but we can even thrive more when we go back into other cycles. And I will tell you this, unless you just have a negative mindset, I've never seen anybody that lived in a down cycle. This is just temporary. It's part of life. I'm sure you guys have went it with business, with life, with relationships. It's something you get used to. But I want to talk about today how to thrive in all cycles. So I'm going to put this PowerPoint on, I hope. And I said I apologize in advance that it's not all pretty and everything, but sometimes it's not a perfect world. Okay, can everybody see that? Thumbs up? Yes? No? Maybe so? Okay.
Yep, we can.
Okay, thank you. So, thriving in all cycles. So let's start with what I'm going to work on doing in this call. The first is I want to explain to you sort of what momentum is and what these cycles look like. I want to explain to you the fundamentals that can help you create what I call constant and never-ending momentum. I share that with you because I believe at the end of the day, what allowed us to thrive in all cycles is we understood the fundamentals of the business, and what we had to do was just practice them differently. So there was an evolution in that part of it, but the fundamentals never changed. And had we not had that foundation, I think things would have looked very differently. And then hopefully show you a path in your Juice Plus business where you can kind of get in a state of constant and never-ending momentum. I will tell you this, in my opinion, great leadership is really defined by your ability to grow and lead in all cycles. I always find it entertaining when I see new leaders coming to the business and they're just on this rocket ship, creating momentum and just can't do anything wrong. And then there's a bump in the road and there's a change. And what I found is it's those times when you really start to see the true character of a leader and when you start to see the real potential of it. And I'll share you with some stories along the way of kind of some of the down cycles and what went on with us. I will tell you at this time, our industry, and not only globally, but Australia, New Zealand, and the company and the leadership in general are facing some headwinds. You know, sometimes the wind's behind you and everything's easy, and sometimes you're fighting headwinds. If you look at things globally in the industry, we're starting to see declining growth. Although there's a large variations in countries, pretty much all the major countries are slowing down in terms of growth, even though the amount of people joining the industry is picking up. If you look at the numbers in Australia that I have there, as you'll see, for the last 3 years, there's been a down cycle in the amount of growth. In New Zealand, 2 out of the last 3 years, 2016 was particularly a challenging year. But I will tell you, in the Juice Plus world, having been on the research committee of the Direct Selling Association, I see all the companies, so I know what's going on. And I will tell you, we're a bit of an exception to the rule. So right now, the legacy companies, the bigger companies out there, are really struggling to grow. And they're struggling for very specific reasons. You know, if you look at the industry as a whole, it's really two things. It is a distribution model for products and services, and it's a business opportunity. And, you know, the distribution model has always been warm market, share with people. And of course, social media has changed all that. Lots of influencers coming in. You have branding playing a bigger role. You have e-commerce driving the consumer behavior. And this is all changing the way customers shop. So we're facing challenges on the distribution side that we've never faced before, but equally the people that are doing that well tend to be doing really well. And then on the business opportunity side, for the entrepreneurs, the small entrepreneurs, what I call micro entrepreneurs, that are the lifeblood of this business, we've always been the home for them. They really haven't had a lot of opportunities. And now that the gig economy and the sharing economy and all this has come about, there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of choices for these people. So we're competing, even though there's more of them, there's more competition for them. And a lot of the legacy companies are struggling with this. A lot of the newer companies coming in are actually doing fairly well. But I would tell you, Juice Plus is an exception. Last year, there were very few top 20 companies that grew in the global economy of direct selling. Juice Plus was one that grew and grew in double digits. We're starting to see a little bit of a slowdown in the growth, although in New Zealand, we're still seeing really strong growth, probably because it's really early in the phase of building critical mass. But this is the interesting part. You don't always have to follow the herd. So sometimes when there's a cycle, you start to recognize that if you're behaving the right way and doing the right things, downtimes can actually be your best times. So at a time where I see the industry struggling a little bit, I'm seeing results with leaders, not only in the Juice Plus world, but in other companies that they're growing bigger and faster than I've ever seen them grow in my 30-year history of the industry. So that's a good sign. And I hope it, at a time where I don't know where your businesses are, whether they're flat, growing, or down, just understand this is a time when you do things right and you're relevant and you're leading in the marketplace and you're practicing good fundamentals, that you can actually have a higher level of success than anybody has ever had in the history of this industry. So let's start here. When we talk about cycles, these are the ones that sort of affect all of our businesses, and we've always known this. If you start at the top with technology, and I would add big data to that, are changing everything to do with our industry. These algorithmic business models have come out and shown us what's possible with technology. Data has become a big part of things, and I will tell you, Juice Plus is a little bit behind the curve here, but this is an area where there's a large focus and a large investment going on. I don't know if the company shared the figures, but I'm happy to share them with all of you. When I was over in the BMR initiative, they had put aside over $35 million just to upgrade all the technology. And of course, that's going to be a huge advantage as we move forward, and technology continues to be a bigger part of things. But as you can gather, if you follow all things technology, what's hot today isn't necessarily tomorrow. The world's changing quicker and quicker. We're seeing changes in cultures, global cultures, our industry culture, individual business cultures. I'll talk about this a little later because there's a really important message here. It said the industry's changing, certainly the economy's evolving, but equally at all times we're dealing with our customers' lives changing, our distributors' lives changing, your life changing. At one point you're focused on your business, the next time there could be some relationship challenge or health challenge. We've got all this competition in the marketplace. So I share this with you because at all times, whether you realize it or not, we're always facing headwinds. We're always having to deal with some cycle changes that are going on around us that affect our world. And one of the things that I learned really early in the game of momentum is that you have to focus on what you can control. If you don't, what happens when these headwinds get stronger, they start to create a lot of fears and they shut people down, and it becomes very detrimental to pulling out of either flat cycles or down cycles, because ultimately you're putting all this energy into things that you can't change anyway. So it's always important to focus on what you can change, but it comes down to a really important question. Is there a reality to creating constant and never-ending momentum? Is there a way that we can always stay in some state of growth? And if so, how do we do that? I will tell you that I believe, and I've seen it in business, there are people that constantly stay in a form of growth and momentum in business. And the way they do it is really simple. They master the fundamentals, they live in execution, and at all times, the application of those fundamentals is evolving. That's what we call relevancy and leadership in the marketplace. So that's kind of what we're going to focus on first. So let's start with just all things momentum. So I know all of you being NMDs, all of you at some point in your career, and maybe still, are creating momentum. This is that first stage that you go through where you're starting a business, and you're building it up to some point, some goal that you set for each other. And then typically what happens for various reasons, at some point it levels off. And at this point, you tend to go one of three directions. The most common direction is to sustain momentum. You see this a lot with leadership, and typically what it begins to look like is when leaders get out of production mode and into management mode. And instead of leading with the paying activities themselves, they're more like the conductor of the orchestra telling everybody else what to do when they're not doing. I know people that live in sustained momentum, what we call the comfort zone, for a long period of time. In my opinion, especially at the speed that the world's changing today, a comfort zone to me is a form of a slow death. And although it might feel good at the time, you will likely find in time, sustained momentum will turn into declining momentum. And at that point, you're really going to have to work at digging out of a hole. The more optimal situation is, as you move into a sustained momentum, to be able to figure out what the blueprint is to advance momentum. So what do I have to get better at? Where do I need to focus on? Where do I need to grow? Where do I fix problems that exist in my business? Because if we're constantly doing this, then we can continue to advance momentum with really no end in sight. So how do we do this? This is the blueprint that I use for constant and never-ending momentum in network marketing. First, practicing the proven fundamentals. I'm going to cover those in a little bit. The second is, our business and the success of our business has always been tied to the ability to build critical mass. So if you look at Jeff's business as an example, why is his check and his success bigger than everybody else's? Primarily because he has more customers and more team working than anybody else. He has critical mass in customer relationships and in distributor relationships. And that's the relationship game. And to be honest with you, the biggest reason that we were able to grow and through all the years that I was with Jeff was because we really understood the relationship game and how to build critical mass, even to the point of going into a new market with nothing and being able to build that market, to develop leadership and to build long, stable, lasting markets. You know, did it with Europe, did it with Israel. Actually, we were the first ones on the ground in Australia, so we got a long way back into this. So we'll talk a little bit about what I call relationship stacking to help identify where the problems are. And then we learned that culture is the ultimate differentiator. That's the thing that's going to matter the most for the longevity piece. We understood there's really three ways to build culture. I'll talk about those. And we also understood that the best way to build stability and longevity and stable, healthy growth was to do what we call cultural addiction. So addicting people to being part of your movement, your culture, your mission, whatever that might be. And then, of course, the next is, you've probably heard the adage many times, you grow before your business grows. We talk a lot about personal development in this space. The reality is that is not the only thing that has to happen for your business to grow. Many people that get in direct selling have no entrepreneurial business experience. This is where we have to begin to teach business development. If you go into the other side, teaching financial development, teaching people how to live below their means and how to build wealth through a business, this is really important. And I guess it was February of 2016, the company flew me in to do a 4-hour financial planning event for the UK and Ireland leaders. And the reason was that they were making all this money, but they were sort of living to their highest check. And of course, the leadership over there knew at some point that would become a problem, because when the cycle changed, if you're living to your highest check, it doesn't take much for all of a sudden you can't pay your bills kind of thing. So they wanted me to come in, and I spent 4 hours doing what I would call financial planning 101. You know, how do you effectively build wealth through a business? And which the interesting thing about it was, I had a number of them come out to me afterwards. It's like, wow, why didn't anybody ever teach us this? Because this is really what we're ultimately trying to do, to build wealth. So it's an area that's not taught much, but I will tell you, in the context of building your business, financial management matters. When we had our biggest fall in the business, part of the reason was because our leaders weren't managing their finances well. And when things changed, they couldn't survive. They were forced to make changes. And for most of them, that change was to move out of the industry into something else. And then, of course, at all times, we have to be embracing change. And then we have to look at where our focus is, because focus really matters in terms of long-term results. So let's move on to the proven fundamentals. To me, there are really 8 of them. So when I'm looking at success and I'm trying to focus in on where do I study where there's holes in my business, it's these 8 areas that I look like. So first is getting customers, pretty simple, customer acquisition. Second, keeping customers, which I call customer engagement. You might call customer retention. I will tell you, one of the reports I get from the company every month, and I think I've probably done coaching with some of you where I showed you the reports when I would do the same report for an individual leader. It's called a net customer report. And basically, if you think of a funnel and a drain, how many new customers have coming in and how many go out, I can look at that ratio and determine if a business is growing, because if I'm losing more customers than I'm getting, the likelihood is my sales are going backwards and my momentum's going backwards. So I can look at any country or any leader and study their net customer activity and pretty much understand what their business is doing. Of course, our industry is big on recruiting, on preaching the power of recruiting. I will tell you, there was a study done out of Northwestern University, which is one of the top business schools in our country. They studied 22,000 distributors, and one of the things that Dr. Coughlin was trying to figure out was what is the highest paid activity. By far, the highest paid activity in our business is recruiting. Some people would say, oh, that's an obvious. I will tell you, that is not a good thing to me, because the highest paid activity in our business shouldn't be recruiting. It should be what happens afterwards, the retention and the building of relationships. If anything, it's quite a testament to how our industry works, maybe why we churn so many people in it. So of course, beyond recruiting, you got to keep team members, distributor engagement. It's not only keep them, it's how long you keep them and at what level they play, how people move up their career path or through the marketing plan. Ultimately, culture is about engaging people in value-based activities. Sometimes we think value is always money. It's not. It really goes back to needs and how that structure works. We talked about the development component. A big one to me, and I covered this when I was over there, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it tonight, but brand expansion. When I look at who is building successfully today and who's doing really well, what I see is they're their own personal brand. This sort of brand view has become a really popular concept, and leaders are building movements around that, and they come in with big audiences, what I call influence base. And, because of that, they have a head start, they go faster. I talked to one girl here recently from another company who is I would call her a branding and social media expert. And it took her less than 8 months to get a 6-figure a month income, because she had a massive market and she had skills in this area. And this is an area that pays really well. When I look around the Juice Plus community today, and I see who's going fast, and I see who are the stories that we're talking about, the reality is the majority of them are social influencers. They're coming in with brands and they know how to build movements. And because of that, they're going faster. So brand expansion is very important. It's not necessarily something a lot of the micro entrepreneurs use. And what we've always taught for years is this idea of a warm market. Who do you know? And that's okay. That's a timeless principle. But I will tell you, it's very limiting, because most people only know so many people. And then even when they have a large list, they tend to be intimidated to talk to some of the people on there. So it's that brand expansion is one of the highly producing revenue activities. And the final one is international expansion. So if you think about the ability of creating critical mass, and I'll go back to Jeff's story, about 60% of his entire business is international. Had he not stepped out of his home market of the US, his business story would be very, very different than it is right now. And of course, he was smart enough to know that you take care of your home market before you start building internationally. So he went about it the right way. So these are the revenues that I think it's important for you to look at in your business. And whatever your cycle you're in, I can promise you, if you do all of these better, or any of these better, you're going to advance your momentum. If you recognize problems and you don't solve them here, they're liable to turn into bigger gaps, and they're liable to either sustain your momentum or to begin to drop it. So let's talk about, okay, so I'm gonna give you the other side of this. When we talk about momentum and highly focused and where the revenue producing activities are, these are the things that I consider the leadership killers in our business. First of all, At the top of my list is business blueprint. So operating with the wrong fundamentals and listening to the wrong people. I'm going to kind of go back to the UK as an example of this. In the early days of the UK, the mentors that they were listening to were great mentors 25 years ago. But some of the principles that they taught were not really principles. They might have worked at that time as a strategy, but they were timeless principles. And some of the stuff they taught was literally regulatory violations. So I think it's important that you understand what the fundamentals are, and you make sure that if you have somebody in your ear telling you something different than practicing these fundamentals, then you're probably gonna get into a situation where that might create growth for a period of time, but when you violate fundamentals, it always creates down cycles. So you gotta be careful to who you're listening to. And I will tell you, in my opinion, we have a lot of the wrong voices in our industry. And it's not that you can't learn something from all of them. It's just important to recognize when somebody's telling you something good or something that could potentially hurt your business. We talked about this concept of net customer growth. So if you're in a situation where you're bringing in 100 customers a month on your team and 101 are going out, then you have to recognize your problem isn't likely customer acquisition, but more customer retention. And how am I going to fix this thing? And it's important to always look at your net customer growth, because your customers are the foundation of your business. Gaps in the relationship stacking process. I'm going to explain that in a minute, because it's how relationships are built through the whole process of this, and where the holes are that you have to fix. Big one for me is qualifying on acquisition volume versus repeat customer orders. Often when I find leaders that have big momentum, this especially happens before conferences, and then their momentum drops. So I'll just use the US as an example. It wouldn't be uncommon for there to be a big push on getting additional qualifiers going into a conference. It also wouldn't be uncommon for potentially 15 to 20% of those qualifiers to drop off afterwards. And the reason is because it's all built on acquisition volume. So acquisition volume requires you to constantly be in the sales process. But if you're in the repeat business, if you're building relationships with your customers, what you're going to have is a more stable base. And I will tell you, if you look at the leaders that you have that are stay in qualification, I think you will find the large majority of them have a strong repeat customer base. Third one is pretty obviously low to leadership engagement. So it's not about how many leaders you have, it's what they're doing as a leader. Like, are they in production mode? Are they in management mode? Are they working full-time? Are they working part-time? Are they working no time, just showing up on a call here and there at conferences? Leadership engagement plays a big role. Another big one, you can pretty much judge the future growth of any company or any distributorship based on the ability to create new leadership. So if I'm looking at your business, and we had a call 2 years ago and we have another call now, and we're talking about the same people, the likelihood is that you're not creating new leadership. And just by the nature of that, leaders sort of have a shelf life. They go through a production stage and then they tend to shift into management. If they have strong incomes, they'll move to much more of a lifestyle focus than a business production focus. But at all times, you need to create new leadership. The lack of frontline leadership, so too little width. Big problem, because if you don't have width, it doesn't take but 1 or 2 lines or people to leave before it has a pretty big impact. Not only a check, but in our marketing plan, it matters for how deep you get paid on your organization. No duplication, which to me is really very little duplication in PB 3 to 5 or beyond. You'll find that people might have a large open volume. You might see a strong PB1 or PB2, but it doesn't go beyond that. And that to me just tells me that this is a leader who sort of is the star of the show, but isn't creating rock stars in their organization. And because of that, they're always sort of running through new people. They have to recruit and acquire new people just to survive in the business, building culture the wrong way, the cultural addiction issue, and then the wrong business focus. So let's look at the relationship game. And this is a bit maybe confusing, but I think it'll help you understand where you might have gaps in this process. So everything starts on the customer side with acquisition. And even if you have a customer that chooses to be a distributor at the same time, It doesn't change the fact that it starts with people buying products. So the top part of that is typically where you'll see a lot of challenges in this business. So people acquire a customer. The problem is they don't keep the customer. So if you were to look at the journey of a customer over time, you would find the largest drop-off is in the first and second reorder. I did one study for the company probably 3 or 4 years ago now, where I tried to say, is there a period of time where you can't get rid of a customer, where there's sort of a customer for life? And the answer was 13 purchases. So we tracked it to know that if they had bought for the 13th time, you almost couldn't pull out of them. It was a part of their journey and a part of their life. And of course, if we can keep them, the next thing we try to do is to elevate them. So we try to get them on more products. So maybe they started with a 2-pack and you move them to the 3-pack, and now with the Omega to a 4-pack, you might bring Complete in. So the elevating of sort of the amount of volume each customer spends, which is called the customer spend in the analytics side, actually makes a difference. And then what are we ultimately trying to do? We're trying to not just get them to be a customer for life, but more of a brand ambassador. People that are going to go out and talk about your product and your company and you as a leader and your team. Think of them as the viral nature of increasing the influence and the prospects that you have for your business. This becomes the home run. And then we know when they start referring people that these customers ultimately tend to convert and they become the distributors. And then once we get distributors, we move into what I call the distributor engagement map. So I just want to touch on one thing. If you want to make the biggest impact on your customer engagement, focus on the first 2 reorders of your business. I don't know what the current date is at the company, but I will tell you at one point when I looked at it, there was about half of the people that came in did not buy a second box. Now think about that in the terms of your numbers and the amount of work. If you could just change that 10% and carry that out over time, the difference that can make. If you're looking to systemize your business, this is where you really want to focus on strengthening customer belief. And this is, I think, a big piece that I find missing a lot with leaders and why they get in troubles with these different cycles. They're always focused on duplication. They're not focused on belief building. Most dealers that you have in this business, and actually most SDVFs, or VS as we would call them, likely will not move much farther into the marketing plan. So what do we need to do? We need to addict into the culture, and we need to make sure that at all times we're doing everything we can to strengthen their belief in the products that they're consuming from us, because if they're doing that, then we know that our worst day is we keep them as a customer. I will tell you, ratio-wise, this will vary. I typically see sort of end consumer relationship is about 8 to 14. So each distributor would tend to have somewhere between 8 to 14 end consumers. And I will tell you that if you can keep them in that range, you'll likely keep them in the business. So focus on that initial stage, especially that first reorder. That's when you really start building a relationship. Now, when we get into the distributor engagement map, I think I've shared this with you guys before. Almost all the business, I've been very liberal with 85 to 95%. It's typically way over 95% are part-timers. They're the micro entrepreneurs. In our business, they are the dealers to SCs, because SCs are when we start to see a breakaway, when people get past SC to more potential income. This group is the largest group. They call in the most customers. They recruit the most people. They do the most of everything, largest percentage of sales. So it's important to manage this group. And if you were to look at the industry and where our struggles are, a lot of it has to do with this area of the business plan, because this group that is basically, I call it stick and carrot thinking. They kind of think in terms of time and value. So they want to put in an hour of time and get paid something for that, because they have very much of an employee mentality. Business doesn't always work that way, but now with these algorithmic companies, the Ubers of the world and these kinds of companies, they're coming in with a better time value proposition. They're coming in where somebody can put a certain amount of time in and get a return. It is really important to understand that you have to set this group up in the prospecting phase from a realistic journey, not some crazy, here's your why and go. It's too big, they can't do it. It actually matters to them what happens in the early part of this journey. And if you look at the industry data, I will tell you, these are the people that we lose, and we lose them pretty quick. Probably the figures in front of me, what I want to say, probably 60% of them within the first 90 days. So if you're looking for an area to fix your business, think about the stacking of relationships. The customers are the foundation. The more we keep them, the more stable the distributorship side is going to be. When we get into the distributorship side, the more stable our micro entrepreneurs are, the more we keep them in the game, the more stable our business is. And then from there, we can begin to build leadership. We can begin to build junior leaders into NMDs and ultimately your elite leaders. I will tell you, this is a big part of how culture works. So if I were to take the different cultures in Juice Plus, I would tell you the strongest culture is the US. And the reason I know that is because they hold the largest amount of these people into the business. So we don't tend to churn as many micro entrepreneurs. And interestingly enough, most of those micro entrepreneurs that are distributors are really like wholesale buyers. I call like a Costco buyer that pay a $50 fee in order to be able to buy the products at a discount. It's about 70% of all the distributors in that group. That's why it's so important with these micro entrepreneurs to not push so hard on the business system, but really push hard on strengthening their beliefs about the product and being a part of this and doing a better job at managing this group. So if you look at your business and you look at the cycle you're in, you'll begin to recognize I can advance my momentum from anywhere if I strengthen my customer retention and I strengthen my micro-entrepreneurial engagements. These are the two big areas that relationships stack up on all things. So give it to you another way. This is sort of what the business process funnel looks like to me. There's always an acquisition phase or recruiting. What happens when we get into this relationship pipe. And what's the goal? More. So I want to expand the amount of relationships I have, and I want to lose less of them. That's the drain piece. I want to make the pipe longer, so I want to keep them in the game longer. And I want to make it bigger so that I have more of them in. I want to increase the funnel and widen the funnel. And ultimately, the strength of your business, if you're looking for any type of residual or passive income, will be determined by independent leaders. And what I mean by that is how many of your leaders, if I took you out of their business, could survive and thrive in this business. One of the reasons Jeff was so successful is because we knew how to build independent leaders. We had a process and a way to get people independent where if we never talked to them again, they would be successful with the business. And in his early days, he could pull this off in about 30 days. Now, I will tell you a little secret. A lot of it had to do with who he recruited. So he was recruiting people that were already proven in the marketplace. He understood that acquiring the right people pays better than recruiting everybody. So he went after the right people, and they were people that once he shared a system with them, that back then that system had to do with classified ads. And some of you on the call probably don't even know what that is. It goes back so far into the process. Those classified ads allowed him to talk to somewhere between 500 to 700 people a week. So he would bring his leader in, he would run the classified ads, they would push people into the system they had, and oh my gosh, he just had an immediate success. I mean, it took Jeff 12 months to get to a $6-figure monthly income, although it was a different time. I don't think it's possible to do that now with the way the business works, but you can look at this funnel and say, okay, in my momentum phase, where am I failing? Am I not bringing in enough prospects? Am I not bringing in enough customers? Am I not bringing in enough recruiters? If I am, what is my relationship game? Am I keeping people in? Am I keeping them engaged? Are they staying in long enough? Are they moving up the career path? And ultimately, as I'm building these leaders, is there any point where a leader can break away from me and succeed without me? Because I will tell you, if you don't get to the final stage, what we really figure out is most people hit a wall And that wall is time. They create enough dependency with enough people that all of a sudden there is no more time to invest into building, into those revenue generating activities. So building culture the right way. Ultimately, I can tell you, everybody you talk to, and this is more about careers, not just entrepreneurism, ultimately want four things. Lifestyle, comfort, which is to me the avoidance of fear and pain, freedom, disengaging from some form of suffering, and impact. And I will tell you, I've never talked to anybody that doesn't want some group of these things, normally all of them. I never know what the prioritization is. I never know how they measure it. So like if Brian and I are comparing lifestyle, what I have as a lifestyle might be very different from his. So I always need to understand how people prioritize this and how they measure the success of it. But ultimately, this is the important thing to understand. If somebody wants freedom, they're always going to focus their discipline on where they think they're going to get it. So discipline is a function of what's important to the individual. So if my business allows them, let's use impact as an example. If they really want to make an impact on the world, and the business that I have them in is helping them do that, and they believe, and not only have hope, but they're seeing in the execution game that this hope is warranted, that turns into something, they're impacting a lot of people, then they're going to be like, well, I'm not going to look for another answer because ultimately I'm getting what I want here. And of course, we try to elevate it from there. So when you have people leaving your business on the distributor side, I will tell you the likely reason is some combination of these, maybe even one of them. They look at the business and they just say, look, there's a better answer, and they move on from that. But it's important to know when you're talking to people prospecting or building relationships that these are ultimately the shared needs that everybody has, even though they're prioritized and measured and fulfilled in different places. So biggie here. And this we'll talk to, I know some of you that are you've been in a strong creating momentum stage. I think there's three directional paths for building a culture. Opportunity-centric, customer-centric, and cultural-centric. So typically, opportunity-centric is what you see our industry doing. And opportunity-centric to me is leading with lifestyle and opportunity, pretty simple. Here's why it works, because it is the fastest path to growing critical mass. So every time we go into a new market, we went in with a heavy opportunity-centric focus because ultimately we needed to create critical mass for the market to survive. And then, so I'm going to give you an example of this, one with the company and one with Jeff. When Jeff got involved in Juice Plus, back then NSA, he got in at a time when the company was doing about $1 million a month in sales. Within 3 years, Jeff came in, brought all the new leadership, created the systems to get it to grow. Everything was so opportunity-centric. I mean, off the charts opportunity-centric, to a point where regulators got involved and rewrote the rules for some of the things that we were doing. But I will tell you, that was the time where we built critical mass faster than we ever had. And we watched the sales go from $1 million a month to $1 million a day in 3 years. And it was the best of times. I always joke and say we couldn't see a problem then because we were too busy counting money. It was just one of those times. And of course, we brought in people that craved opportunity, that saw everything in the context of money being the longest priority. And it was the best of times until it ended. And I will tell you, this is where we made one of the more critical mistakes we had ever made in the business. That we didn't see what was coming and we didn't adjust to changing from an opportunity-centric culture to a customer-centric culture before we suffer the consequences of waiting too long. So we watched literally hundreds, over 500 in the US, over 500 in Europe, leave the business, NMDs leave the business in a very short period of time. We watched the sales literally implode. There was a time coming out of this where we didn't have a product. We didn't know what we were going to do. We tried different products. It was a time where, it was the only time in my life where I believed the company was going to go out of business. So it was a very scary time, and there was a lot invested into the company. But I will tell you, during this time period, this is when I became a fan of Jay Martin as a leader. Because at this time, as you can imagine, if this was your company and you're seeing all this stuff happening, and you're going through this, it's not a down cycle, it's like you fell off a cliff, what do you do? And I saw Jay go all in. I mean, he invested tens of millions of dollars changing this thing. He believed in his leadership. They believed in him. And this is when we found Juice Plus. And Juice Plus changed the direction of the company. We went from selling an appliance, water and air filters, to selling a consumable products. And we got some pushback originally. And of course, we fought for that. And that became the beginning of the Juice Plus era. And things went very customer centric. So all of a sudden we were talking about customer bases and repeat business, and the product led everything. And it took the company from almost a point of bankruptcy to a point of doing about 300 million a year in sales. So it was a huge shift. And I share that with you because for a lot of you that have been in this for a couple years, that are opportunity centric and you built heavy on lifestyle, that's okay. But just remember, you got to make the shift and go stronger on the customer side if you want to hold the stability of the business over time. So we did this, and this worked for, oh my gosh, 20 years. Just had a huge run. And this is what's going on in the industry, by the way. A lot of the industry is moving out of the opportunity-centric focus to more of a customer-centric focus. We took it one step farther. So back 4 or 5 years ago, we had seen the sales flatten out. So we were in a flat momentum stage. We were sustaining momentum. So the customer base stayed the same for about 5 years, 6 years. Didn't grow, sales didn't grow. And then we came in and introduced this concept of a mission-driven model. We started to build around culture and mission and movements. And instead of now this constant pendulum swinging back and forth between opportunity and customer, we built culture. And I will tell you, this is something that I see a lot of leaders doing today well. We're seeing a lot of social influencers coming in with their own movements. And these movements are a form of culture. Their team culture is what creates the chemistry that builds that sense of belonging. And when we did this at Juice Plus, the sales went from about 300 million to, I think last reported sales were about 750 million globally a year. And the customer base went from 350,000 customers to over 1 million customers. So that just goes to show you what happened. So how did the process work? Used opportunity to create critical mass, shift to the customer size to build stability, shift to the culture to get the best of all worlds. And you've got to look at your business and say, where am I at directionally with the culture, the team culture I'm building, and where do I need to shift? I will tell you that I think the sooner you shift to cultural centric, where it's not a debate whether opportunity or leading with the product is the best, but both exist under the mission of inspiring healthy living or whatever your directional path might be for your movement. So we go back to this idea of engagement, of building relationships. And I've shared with you this, that engagement just a formula for me, the triumph of hope over experiences, and hope being about future beliefs, and experience just being about the day-to-day things that we do. I will tell you directionally, this is a mistake that I see people make when they're in a down cycle. So things start dropping, and what do? They go right back into the hope game. So instead of fixing the execution piece that focuses on making the journey work better, they go into, this becomes the narrative. Oh my gosh, what's your why? And one day you're going to be an NMD and a 39 clubber and all this kind of stuff. So they go back to marketing hope again, recognizing that this worked before. But I will tell you, when you market hope and you don't deliver on it, after time you lose trust. And you lose trust in your team, you lose trust in your marketplace, and it affects your brand. So if you're struggling when creating hope, you need to get into the execution game. And the execution game is about experiences. It's truly about understanding how to keep experiences positive and meaningful. Let them create the hope for the future, confirm the hope that people have, and then ultimately to elevate hope. And I will tell you that ultimately, if you want to addict people to culture, the two best mindsets you can create are around faith and identity. So think about, I want to explain faith and what I mean by this. So think about all the left side of this sheet, intentions, attentions, execution. So think about Intentions is all the beliefs you have in your head, all your visions of what you want your life to be, all these different blueprints that you have. And these intentions become your thoughts. And what do you begin to do? You put them into action. You make them tangible. You do things like goals and vision boards and affirmations and all these kinds of things that allow us to put our thoughts into paper, into something that we can see and follow. And then ultimately, none of that matters if you don't execute. But what we know is when you execute properly and you elevate hope, at some point, hope turns into faith. And the difference between faith and hope is faith is never defeated by experiences. It is an ongoing, constant belief. If you can build people's faith in your product, in your culture, in your team, these are the people that will stay with you forever. And ultimately, identity is who you are and what you're about. When who you are and what you're about ties back to this business, these are the people that become, here for life. So when we talk about cultural addiction, what we're really talking about is a psychology principle. And that psychology principle has to do with needs. So I just put Tony's needs on here because I'm sure a lot of you have studied with Tony Robbins, certainty, uncertainty, significance, love and connection, growth and contribution. The way the addiction principle works is this. If I'm new in the business, I'm not really sure necessarily why I came in, but let's suppose I came in because I saw a bunch of cool people and I thought, well, I could build some great relationships here. So let's call that a love and connection thing. So I'm outside this circle. I have a perception that I'm going to have some need met. I go into the culture and that need is met, and it's met better than everyone else. Now I'm on the first circle of that bullseye. I then recognize, wow, this person really wants recognition. They crave significance. So I give them recognition. And second, by the way, the second highest paid activity in all network marketing is recognition. So I give them recognition. Now I have two needs being met. What we know is that when 3 or more needs are met in any culture or anything, I can addict them to that culture. So your job is to understand people's needs and to make sure they're fulfilled here. And if you do it with enough of the needs, this is what creates cultural addiction. And I will tell you, if you don't think it matters, I'll give you this piece of fact. If you look at, so studies show from an income standpoint, it takes $300 to $500 a month to keep somebody in the business. I would venture to say with almost all network marketing companies, 98% or more of people don't make that much money. So why in the world do they stay? The reason is because value is not just about money, it's about needs, it's about all these other things. I know people that do a little bit in this business that have been in this business since we started Juice Plus. They're not NMDs, they're not even SCs, but they show up at everything because they're having other needs met. If you want to get into the game of longevity, you have to get into the cultural addiction game. And the addiction now goes back to beliefs and standards. So you know what beliefs are. They're just your conclusions you make from experiences. It's the programming of your brain. What do you need to strengthen? Beliefs about products, beliefs about opportunity, beliefs about the company and culture and the mission, belief about the industry, the belief about entrepreneurism versus going to work for somebody, and of course self-belief. And then equally, the standards that we create in culture begin to define how culture works. And the standards to me, and I don't have time to go through them, you can read them: abundance, pursuit of excellence, work ethic, and service. So if I can meet their needs and I can strengthen their beliefs and create these kind of standards, I will tell you, you can create a team culture or a business that stays in a constant state of momentum. And then when you get into the team building process, recognize there are 2 questions that every distributor in every organization from now to eternity will ask. Can I do it, and is it worth it? So ultimately, you recognize that team building evolves around 3 simple questions. Can I do it? Will I do it? And are they a fit to the team? And ultimately, you go back to the concept, the best place is to have their identity tied to it. So a lot of times we'll see people, for instance, they'll lose momentum because they'll see the potential in somebody and they'll recognize, wow, they could really do this. They could be the best of all time, and they invest all this, but they don't pay attention to, well, will they do it? At the end of the day, are they looking at this and saying this is the best choice for where they're going to invest their discipline? If not, then what you begin to realize is you could be actually spending your time hurting your business, not making it grow. So we know about constant personal financial development. The growth areas for me, the momentum areas, so where do I create change? Thinking, integration, so that's activities and execution, and resolve, the idea of staying the course. Typically, when I look at where all this is focused, it's on these 6 areas, career, lifestyle, personal development, health, relationships, and finances. I have a lot of time to go into that part, but I want to talk about change, because the reality is, for any of you, no matter where you're at, what you've got to be looking at is what you're doing to grow. So I don't care what cycle. If you're already growing, how do you grow faster? If you're not growing, how do I begin growing? If you're declining growth, how do I change the course? And this goes back to sort of a simple process that I've used forever. Matter of fact, I use this pretty much all the time in all my coaching and all my personal stuff. Stage 1 is recognition. So you've got to, at some point, accept that things are not ideal. That if I'm not headed to the wrong place, I'm headed in that direction. And I have to be able to recognize that and to figure out what the problem is. Hopefully, through the first, through most of this presentation, you got an idea where to look for problems. Now, I will tell you, the worst type of change is the change that's forced on you. One of the reasons I've managed to stay in a state of momentum is because I tend to be very proactive in studying where I can improve, and I invest into that process well before something changes in my life that creates some catastrophic situation. A lot of my coaching with people is really this aspect of coaching. How do I help them recognize a problem and to help them see potential solutions for that problem? That's the plan piece. I will tell you that once you have an idea of what's wrong and how to fix it, there is a point in time where you have to have a breakthrough. And I'm going to use Tony's definition for this because it's the one I love the most. A breakthrough is a moment in time where you decide nothing will ever be the same. And the reason this is so important, because when you commit to change, what I can promise you is obstacles will show up. And the stronger that commitment is, the less of a probability those obstacles will defeat you. Because if you don't have that breakthrough, it doesn't take long for an obstacle to show up and for you to revert back to the analysis process to kind of stay where you're at, to get caught in that comfort zone. But once you have that breakthrough, and I don't care what that breakthrough is, it could be a change of a limiting belief, it could be a new strategy, it could be a new system, it could be a new relationship, it could be a myriad of potential tactical strategies. Once you have that breakthrough, what do? You create a plan. And when you create that plan, you execute. And then when you execute, you measure, and you just keep going through this process over and over and over again. And as I've lived this process my whole life, I've been fortunate to constantly stay in relatively good growth modes. I have my moments like anybody else, but for the most part, this is how I live my life. And it's an important thing to do so that you don't get stuck in the wrong cycle. What I was saying earlier is understand this about a strategy or a breakthrough, about a plan. One little change can completely change your business forever. Don't think that there isn't an exponential growth factor with a little change. Sometimes just working with somebody and giving them self-belief gives them confidence, and that confidence turns into some form of a better execution, and it changes the game. Sometimes you can work with somebody and give them a new strategy. So like a good one for me would be, I've been working with a lot of leaders on attraction versus recruiting. And a lot of leaders that I work with that started understanding that game have had massive success, where their businesses were stuck for some period of time, they begin to grow. So this is a good process to use. I'm not going to go through this. So just remember, at the end of the day, focus does matter. You can only serve so many masters at one time. I have found when I'm doing something, the more focused I am, the higher the probability is for success. So where do you need to focus? Focus on where you have the highest probability to win. Focus on what's broken. Usually that's some kind of programming in your mind. It's skill sets that you're lacking. It's some component of the execution game. Or it could be your result. It could be that courage to see change out and that grit and perseverance it takes. Of course, if you have something that works, what do you want to do? You want to feed it. But make sure that you're not feeding something that short-term gains come at the cost of long-term success, and that at all times you should be innovating. And I'm going to kind of pick on Brian here. He's one of my favorite leaders to talk to, because every time we have a conversation, that conversation seems to be focused on innovation. Like, how do I do things better? How do I find relevancy and leadership in the marketplace? And Brian's just one of the guys who's an execution guy like me, but he has such a DNA of growth and innovation. And because of that, he's always looking to stay ahead of the curve. And I think that's a great quality to have in leadership. So I'll leave you at this. Saying I'm right at the end of my time. To me, business is about the pursuit of a higher quality problem. So if you're looking to change the cycle you're in, find a higher quality problem to solve. And if you do that and you focus on one thing, you can begin to stack solutions. And all of a sudden, what feels like a step in a direction of momentum becomes a huge growth spurt that can literally last for years and years. So I thank you all. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Sorry that my PowerPoint wasn't up to as professional as I would like it to be, but hopefully you got a good content out of it. So Brian, back to you.
Awesome, buddy. You are amazing. Hey, I'm just gonna get control of this for 1 second. Try to get control of this. All right. Yeah, so do you have a few minutes for questions? Does anyone have questions?
Of course.
Does anyone want to come off mute and have a chat? I know.
They're all hiding.
They are. Our point was freaking amazing. Yeah, you're just getting logged on, buddy. I know for us, like we have been very acquisition focused, and our growth and what we're focused on at the moment is becoming customer and cultural centric. One exercise we went through is just to define our values. You know, we questioned our leaders and we went through a process of working out who we were as a tribe, who we wanted to be. Maybe we've missed it on some parts, but we've come out with like our culture, our values, which we know is going to set the foundation for our culture. And so we're very focused on exactly what, you know, you've been delivering. And I've got 10 pages of notes here. So there's lots of things we can get to. So,
I will tell you on the value part, I think that's a great place to start, because I find when there's shared values and standards, what you avoid is what I call the 3 cancer killers of culture: division, entitlement, and drama. Right. So when that rules your world, it's hard to ever stay in any state of momentum. So you'll always want to avoid, as I said, those 3: division, entitlement, and drama. And I've gotten so worn out with the drama game over the years with people, because I seem to get brought into lots of situations where I always kind of put up, you know, happy me equals drama free. And I kind of live by that mantra as much as I can.
Jackie has a question: tips around shift to attraction marketing.
Yep. So first tip is you've got to figure out who you want to attract. So you always need to have sort of an ideal customer profile. So when I go back to Jeff's story, his ideal customer profile were proven entrepreneurs that were proven in the network marketing space because he knew they would go faster. So you've got to figure out who your ideal customer is. If your ideal customer is everyone, then you're going to get into the development and motivation game. So if you look at your business and you say, well, to grow, I have to motivate and develop people, then you likely need to look at attraction and figure out, how do I get better people to start with? So find people that are proven in the marketplace, find people that have a strong entrepreneurial belief. I think it pays to find people that have some level of financial security and education. There's a lot of studies in our industry that show that financially stable and educated people tend to do better in this business model. And there's lots of different profiles you can use, but you have to find the profile. And then you have to kind of look at your own brand and say, okay, am I a brand in the marketplace that will attract these kind of people? So if you're, for instance, I'm just gonna use myself as an example, if you're gonna come after me as a distributor and you're gonna come after me with some brand about how you developed a bunch of part-time people and to make $100 a month, probably not going to align with what I'm looking for in life. You know, the paths that I'm gonna get, lifestyle, comfort, freedom, and impact. So you have to become what people want. And then, so once you do that, then the question is, where are these people? So you've either got to go out and create advertising or brand visibility, or you have to plug in where they are. Because ultimately, the visibility part is important. No brand works without visibility. You just become the world's best kept secret. And then when you go in and do that, at that point, you have to ask, can you earn a relationship with them? So can you get the job done? Because when you attract better people, they tend to have way different standards than everybody else. And they're going to live in the execution game. You're not going to be able to sell hope to these people. You have to master the execution game to keep good people. So one of the examples that I used last time I was in Australia is you either create an audience or you go to where one that exists is something like a Circle of Moms, a massive online forum with tens of millions of people interacting on that forum. I call them passion communities because there's a lot of passionate people in there that it's like a home. It's where they communicate. But I will tell you the mistake people make when they go in there, and this is important for the attraction game, you have to go in there and recognize job number one is to add value and to connect, not to sell. If you go into those marketplaces and you're not connecting and adding value to earn your way to an influencer, and you immediately come in trying to sell, you'll be outed. Like people will be like, oh, he's only in here to sell me something, and you won't become an influencer in that community. But when you become an influencer in the community, it's very powerful what you can do. And there are so many communities out there that you can plug in, whether it's health or opportunity, it doesn't matter which one it is, they're out there. So that's where I would start. I would figure out how I'm going to create visibility. Do I have a brand that attracts the people I want? Who are those people? And ultimately, when they come in, can I keep them? Can I serve them as a leader? And I will tell you, the funny thing is, what I learned with those, when I attract the right people, here's the funny thing, it doesn't take long before this is what I hear from them. Hey, here's an idea. Why don't you get out of my way? I got it. Because ultimately they value autonomy and they're quick to create it on their own. It's when people don't want that I tend to have a lot of work. Even a coaching person, if they're seeking dependency in all things, it's like a project that never ends. So I think you have to be prepared to attract these people and then to give them what they need to find a path to independence and autonomy quicker than, the quicker the better to me. And it's not that you lose them, it's not that you don't have a relationship, it's that they can run on their own. So if I were to use, I'll just use Adam and Kira as an example. When they came in to the business and when Linda had originally brought them in, I would venture to say, Linda's an amazing leader, a leader of leaders, but I would venture to say that Adam and Kira would probably be successful regardless of who their upline was. And I don't mean to take anything away from Linda because Linda's an amazing leader, but they're also really good at what they do. And the funny thing is, if you look at people that are really strong in our business, you would probably surmise the same thing I do, that they're going to be strong in any business because that's who they are. And that's what you want to attract to the business, people that are willing to take ownership of their own success and run with it. And if not, if you're going to keep recruiting and stay in the recruiting game, then you better develop strong systems to strengthen people's beliefs, to attract them to culture, to develop them, to keep them in the game, because they're the people that just move slow through the process or get stuck in it. So I don't know if that answered your question, but hopefully it gave you a little bit of advice. I don't know who asked that question. Jackie?
Yeah, Jackie.
Jackie, if you want to reach out to me, just message me on Facebook. I'll be happy to jump on a call with you and see if I can answer any other questions you might have on that.
So Gordon, a follow-on question to that are the people that are recruiting the micro entrepreneurs, have you seen them do it successfully and build substantial businesses, and addicted them to that culture, addicted them to and had good systems in place?
Yeah, because they didn't listen to the advice they were giving. What we preach with those people is duplication. What we should be preaching is belief building.
Yeah. Because
belief building and cultural addiction is what holds them in, not duplication. If the beliefs aren't there, they won't even follow systems. So it's really, that's, I think, the mistake people make with that group is they don't understand that the stronger the belief is, the stronger I addict them. This isn't a game of just, here's the duplication system and do this. That's just a piece of it, but it's not the most important piece to me. So yes, I see people that do it, but they understand what they're trying to accomplish and they haven't followed the traditional thinking that all things are about duplication. And the funny thing is, so Brian, I'll use you as an example. When you came into the business, did you follow every system that was given to you or did you create your own?
We definitely innovated around systems.
There you go. And so, go ahead.
We were teachable to the process, like the process that worked, but we definitely innovated around some systems. Yeah.
Yep. So I think you've got to look, and if you're leaning on duplication, you might want to look at what you're doing with these micro entrepreneurs and start looking at more from a belief building standpoint to keep them in the game. The other thing I was going to tell you is there's a huge movement now to what they call a focus on micro influencers. So now a year ago, everybody was talking about how do I find the Instagram person with 10 to 50,000 people? Now it's like, how do I find the Instagram person that has 1,000 to 2,000 people? Because they're being overlooked and they come in with a market too of people to talk to, and there's more of them. So if I'm out looking for influencers, don't think about going after the elephant. Don't think about going after somebody with 10 million people. Go find somebody with a couple thousand people because they're probably looking for an opportunity and they understand the social media game. They'll likely have systems around their business. You might have to help them with some component of that, but that's a good group to attract into the business these days.
I think Tamara's got a great question around that. What are some of the techniques that you've seen work really well in our biz for building the various areas of belief?
Well, to me, all beliefs are formed through experiences. So the people that create the best experiences create the best beliefs. So they invest into experiences, whether it's online or offline. So kind of, if you look at what happens when people don't have good belief and you go back and say, okay, well, what experiences did I connect them to? Did I send them to events that inspired them and gave them the ability to succeed in the business? Did I connect them with people that created positive, meaningful experiences? Or did I put them in some kind of a drama fest where they're like, oh my God, I got enough of this everywhere else in life. I think I'll get out of this. So I think it always go back to experiences because the sort of pathology of the brain is experiences. What does our mind do? It focuses. And what do we do with that focus? We create conclusions, and those conclusions are our beliefs. So I think when you look at the power of beliefs, it really comes back to two things: emotion and repetition. So it's the habits and the emotions are sort of the door to the subconscious, the stronger part of the brain. So if I have systems and processes that work, events, for instance, that work, and I do them over and over again, it becomes repetition and it strengthens people's beliefs. If I do things, and the question I have is, how do I elevate the positive emotional impact or meaning they give to an event? It's going to strengthen the power of the belief. So a lot of times when you're looking at all things to do with belief, it's not just the experience, it's the power of the experience and the repetition of it that begin to matter. So you kind of got to look at it from that context.
Awesome. That's amazing. So Angela Gerbert has written, so keep an SC with a huge customer base and 3 team is a very happy SC rather than keep on pushing. Yes. The question, keep pushing or keep them happy with 3 teamies and a good customer base?
I don't believe in pushing people. I believe inspiring people and let them find their own journey. What would I do with an SC that had a huge customer base and 3 teamies? I'd see if I could keep them forever and find out if I could find 100 more just like them. I mean, it only becomes an issue if they're sucking all my time. So if all of a sudden this SC wants 50% of my time with their group, then I've got to build systems and kind of figure out my way around that. But the goal is to keep people in the game. Of course, where they're in the game can make a difference in the level of success you're going to have. But at any level is better than them being gone. So would I take an SC like this? All of them I could get and line them up. I'll take them from now to eternity. And I think this has been part of the research from the DSA. One of the things that is a major turnoff is pushing people beyond where they're willing and ready to go. You really have to pay attention to what people are wanting to do and to help in their journey, not push them too far into it. And sort of, as I said, it's a game of not chasing destinations. It's a game of making the journey work. Small, independent. So I'll give you a classic example. To me, if I look at the use of goals, there's all kinds of philosophies on this. You'll have some people, the hope marketers, will come and say, okay, we're all going to be NMDs. Okay, well, we're not going to all be NMDs. It's like 2 out of 1,000 maybe you'll be NMDs. So I'm not sure that's a good goal to set. But what do we do with people that don't have a lot of strength, a lot of belief? We keep simple goals. maybe getting a customer strengthens their confidence and allows them to go seek 2 more customers. And what you begin to realize, this is where freedom comes in for me. Think about freedom, disconnecting from some form of suffering. If I know what some form of suffering is, my question is, what's the easiest suffering I can solve? And I want to focus a goal on that because that's going to be meaningful to them. And it could be something really easy. I just don't know. It varies by people. But I don't think people use goals the right way in this business to keep people in a journey. I think, if anything, our tendency to market hope has us selling the extremes. And I will tell you, I think this is a big part of why we churn people, because we set up delusional journeys. We set up hope the wrong way, and people can't live that journey or fulfill what we set up for them, and then they leave the industry. And, you know, this is a huge problem. And I think the only way to avoid this problem is don't create hope that you're not willing to be able to fulfill in the experiences of your business. You know, it's just so important because ultimately, remember, critical mass, how many relationships? How do you keep relationships if you're pushing people where they don't want to be, if you're setting up goals they can't achieve, if you're creating the wrong experiences for them? This all kind of goes back to just a simple concept of it's all about building relationships. And what's the best way to go about doing that? And then to recognize, so on the relationship front, just recognize it's just 2 things, character and value. So character is a measurement of selfishness. And I will tell you, the minute your leaders see that your agenda is more important than the service of them, you will lose in business. I don't care what the business is. And the value is the ability to meet people's needs. You know, at the end of the day, people are trusting you as a leader. They're investing into what you're offering them, and it's supposed to make some impact on their life. You better be able to make that impact, or you won't build relationships. They will find other places to do it. But when you're good at building relationships, this is an amazing business. And I will add one more thing to that. There's an old adage we always joke here, speed kills. I do believe you can take shortcuts to building relationships that will long-term destroy your business. Relationships are an investment. They're an investment of your time. And sometimes you just have to go a little slower to build stronger connections. Connection, remember, trust, care, help. To know that people can trust you, to know that you care, and to know that you can help them on whatever that journey is to them. The more you invest into that process, the more they'll believe in your leadership, and the more they'll overcome all cycles and all challenges and all problems that are part of every journey of everything in life.
Yeah, awesome. I think there's one real quick question from Lee Campbell. When you talked before about that financial call you did for the UK leaders, was that recorded, or do you have anything similar to that?
It was not recorded, but I think I did an interview for a guy and I redid that call, and I think I have it saved. But if not, I'm happy to jump on a call if you guys want to do a financial planning 101 and walk through the basics of that so that you can learn how to build wealth in business. Totally up for doing a call like that if you guys want to do it.
Awesome. I'll reach out to Celine. I'm sure we'd love to put that together. Gordon, you are an amazing servant leader. I'm sure everyone's got pages of notes, but the thing now is that we've got to go and execute that stuff, right? This is where all the work starts. So we love you, and we thank you for your time, buddy.
Thank you. And if anybody needs me, if I can help, just reach out to me. And thank you. And by the way, last thing, congratulations to everybody. It has been going on probably 3+ years now that Australia has been the talk of the Juice Plus community. Mm-hmm. So I know things are probably flattening out a little bit, and that's a great time because that means you guys get to transform and keep the story going and make it even bigger and better. So I wish you the best, and I'm here to help any way I can.
Thank you, buddy. Thanks so much. See you guys. Thank you.
Bye-bye.